Comrades, friends, it's an enormous privilege that I was invited to participate in the 61st anniversary celebrations of the KSSP. I wish I was able to join you personally, but for various reasons I was unable to be there in person, and therefore instead I'm here speaking to you electronically. I hope there will be another occasion when I can come and spend time with you. I have enormous admiration for the KSSP, for its work and contribution. When I was a young IAS officer, the literacy campaign took inspiration from the work of KSSP. As the country slips deeper and deeper into a place of darkness with the erosion of democratic values, the work of KSSP becomes even more significant, even more important. At this time, I thought if we could locate the work of KSSP, its work in popularizing science, in health and education, in its principled opposition to neoliberalism, you recognize how significant this work is, not just in itself, but also it is significant for its contribution to the defense of constitutional values at a time when these values are so much under threat. What are the values of the Constitution? They're laid out clearly in the preamble of the Constitution, which Babasaheb Ambedkar left for us. Secularism, socialism, democracy, justice, liberty, equality, fraternity. These are spelt out in the Constitution itself. But I think there are two more essential elements to our constitutional framework and its morality. And these are scientific temper and federalism. And we're living in times when every one of these values is under attack. There's also the neoliberal model is resulting in unimaginable differences between the gaps between the wealthiest and the poorest. And we're seeing also times when when the rights of the state are also under attack. And it is for this reason that, as I said, the work of KSSP is significant for itself, but at a time when constitutional values are so much under attack, for upholding and defending the values of the Constitution itself. And therefore, I salute KSSP, I salute all of its fine workers who over the last 61 years have contributed so valuably to uphold, advance scientific temper, literacy, education, health, and the promotion of egalitarian values. Let me now, in the remaining time that I have to speak with you, speak about the dangers to democracy that I find India is sort of hurtling with. We're seeing, in fact, the very rapid decline of democracy. In some ways, the strength of a democracy can be understood on two parameters. I think because very often we simplistically understand democracy as the will of the majority. But the will of the majority, if it is untrammeled, uncontrolled, can grow into fascism in the way that we are seeing it grow in our country and many other countries of the world. So to my mind, the strength of a democracy is, on the one hand, the strength of a democracy is directly proportional to the strength of the opposition. And here I'm not just talking about the political opposition, But opposition from various institutions of democracy, the judiciary, the media, even the independent civil service, academia, and civil society, people's movements. So the stronger these are, the stronger is democracy. And on the other hand, the strength of a democracy is directly proportional to the extent to which it secures the protection of the rights of the most oppressed of its minorities. And it is on these yardsticks that we see India democracy failing, and the decline is sharp and precipitous. It is not as if this decline only started 10 years ago, since Mr. Modi assumed power in the center, but it's been steadily declining in more recent decades. But the fall has been sharp and precipitous in the last 10 years. So let me take the question of the opposition, where, and a powerful executive, what are the systems and the institutions that should control its power, exercise of power? So let's start with Parliament itself and the political opposition. We've seen in these last 10 years that Parliament has been reduced almost to a rubber stamp that sort of just reconfirms anything that the executive wants to do. Of course, Parliament wasn't even consulted in some of the most drastic measures like demonetization. Even the cabinet clearly wasn't, or the lockdown. But we are seeing very, very significant laws. For example, the large-scale revision of India's criminal codes, laws of evidence, and so on. All of these have been altered and modified, and this rightfully should have been preceded by extensive consultation with parliamentary groups, members of parliament, but also public consultations in a wide way. But none of these have happened. So Parliament has become a place where in a sense, everything that the executive wishes is rammed through without debate, without even transparency. The electoral bonds, for instance, anonymous electoral bonds, all sorts of changes have brought in very fundamental changes. The political opposition itself, we see its voice is often squeezed, muffled through the use of a whole range of the misuse of a whole range of agencies of the federal government, the CBI, the Enforcement Directorate, Economic Offences Wing, and so on and so forth. So you see any political voice of opposition, which once it becomes powerful, we see the use of all of these agencies, and sometimes even charges of that you made some remark which is considered defamatory and selectively, and that is used even to disqualify senior members of Parliament. So Parliament and the political opposition, which is tamed with the use of the misuse of all of these agencies, is no longer a place for keeping the executive in check. Then there is the higher judiciary. And here, the past years, India has had a rich tradition, with the exception of the period of the emergency, of a generally vibrant, independent, deeply respected higher judiciary. But in recent years, we are seeing in many crucial matters, we are not seeing the judiciary taking the kinds of stands consistently, and that it must, in the defense of its constitutional duties. I mean, to give a few examples, we're seeing people who have been incarcerated, put in prison for 4-5 years without even the trial beginning, and the judiciary is just watching and letting it happen. The judgment around Ayodhya and the Ram temple was an extraordinary judgment because it admitted both that the mosque was brought down by a major act of crime when a mob illegally and in defiance of both the law and the Supreme Court demolished the mosque in 1992, but also that there is no incontrovertible evidence that a temple actually stood below the mosque, where the site of the mosque, and yet it passed order. And it hasn't stopped there, because despite a very clear law in 1991 that no place of worship, the status of a place of worship in 1947 will not be questioned or altered. But despite that, we are seeing the courts allowing the reopening of disputes of temples and mosques in Varanasi, in Mathura, and it is as though it is opening up the doors for the next generations of conflict. The use of the bulldozer against India's, by the state in a completely lawless way, targeting particularly Muslim minorities in many parts of the country, has not been constrained by the state. The extraordinary method in which the elected legislature was bypassed before Article 370 was written down, and the powers of the state to unilaterally convert any state into a union territory. These are just some examples where, among many, the challenges to the Citizenship Amendment law still hasn't been resolved. So the judiciary as a place of defense of our rights has not had the kind of consistent, reliable, robust independence and constitutional propriety that we would have hoped for it in these really difficult times. The media, it's just incredible what has happened to the media. In close, media is of course owned almost entirely now by big business. But something else has also happened. So we see that the media, in the emergency, I mean, if we go back to the emergency, the media was constrained. But it protested, it was, it indicated its opposition. And once the emergency was lifted, it restored its independence. Today, we're seeing a strange situation where there is no formal curbs on the freedom of speech of the judiciary, but it is completely crawling in a sense. So on the one hand, it never raises difficult questions from the Prime Minister and from the government. It seems to exist only to support and celebrate as cheerleaders of government and whatever it does. But on the other hand, it also has become cheerleaders of something much more dangerous, and that is the campaigns of hate targeting Muslim and sometimes Christian minorities. in accordance with the ideological sort of positions of the RSS, which is the ideological lodestar for the ruling BJP government. And so we're seeing the media amplifying hate prejudice on the one hand, and celebrating uncritically everything that the government is doing, the central government is doing. Of course, in the context of what KSSP does related to this is a lot of channels that are devoted to promoting superstition, and so that's sort of what the media has become. And then academia, the intellectual class, is another area of expected opposition. But the university, the liberal arts university, is under such severe attack. And in university after university, we are finding simple questioning. University is a space where young people should have the freedom also even to make mistakes, to ask questions, to ask difficult questions. They may be right or they may be wrong, but they must have the protection and freedom to do this. Most recently, Jindal University, which is, was listed as one of our higher institutions of excellence. Two students wanted to have a debate on the Ram temple consecration, and not only were they expelled, but in the middle of the night they were forced to vacate their rooms. Extremely unfortunate that this climate of fear has penetrated all our universities, and a place like the Jawaharlal Nehru University in Delhi was a fine example of what a university should be, a public university, where they had the admission policies provide for people from the most disadvantaged backgrounds. They are admitted, they are supported, and there has been a wonderful tradition of political diversity, debate, questioning. All of that has been completely crushed. So the academia as a place of dissent also does not survive. Another institution which has also collapsed, which I want to talk about very briefly, is the civil services. Having been part of the IAS for almost 2 decades, I realize how important the duty of the IAS, the IPS, and the diplomatic service, etc. are. We can recall when Sardar Patel spoke about the civil services as being the steel frame of the country. What he meant was that it was in the shadows of all the partition violence. 1 million people had killed each other. The expectation that for a long time politicians might raise divisive questions of religion, caste, language, and stoke these dangerous sentiments for national unity. But it was expected that it was the higher independent civil services which would stand in defense of the Constitution. In fact, I taught for a few years in the IAS Academy in Missouri, and my first class always used to be, I used to talk about the right and the duty of a civil servant to dissent. I would say that you'll be told your duty is primarily to obey, and that's not true. You're here, you're the servant, yes, of the elected government, but before that you're the servant of the Constitution, and you're a servant of the poorest and most vulnerable in your jurisdiction. And only after that you are the servant of the elected government. And if you need to protect the interests, or you have to defend the Constitution and defend the most vulnerable, it might very often require you to stand up in dissent, and even a refusal to obey unconstitutional, unjust orders. That again has become very, very rare in our times, when all of these institutions of opposition to the state are in advanced stages of crumbling, breaking down. What is left is the citizen herself. We, the people of India, gave ourselves a constitution, and it is for we, the people of India, to stand in its defense. There are moments when citizens in recent times have stood up gloriously. The opposition to Citizenship Amendment Act led to spontaneous nationwide peaceful protests. In those 100 days, I was traveling, addressing gatherings in far corners of the country, including Kerala, and it was exhilarating to see Hindus, Muslims, Christians, Sikhs, Dalit, Adivasi, all standing together in opposition to a law that was clearly unjust to just one religious community, the Muslims. And then we saw the farmers' protests. This, again, a glorious protest for one full year through the seasons. The ways that farmers held out, and again, without violence. These are both extraordinary examples of very powerful non-violent protests, and it is one of the only places where the very powerful executive Prime Minister had to bend and actually withdraw the laws, the three laws which farmers felt were handing over India's agriculture to a few big business houses. So it is here that the furthest frontier of opposition to a majoritarian crony-capitalist government which has no respect for democratic institutions and processes. I should have also mentioned the Election Commission as another institution that has got eroded, the National Human Rights Commission. So in a time when every institution of democracy, which was meant to act as a check and balance to the power of the executive, seems to be crumbling and failing us, it is even more important for people's movements to rise up, to stand together across class, across caste, across region, across language, across religion, stand together against injustice in the way that we saw in the CA protests. The fact that a law was passed which was seen as unjust to one community, it was not that community alone that stood up against, in protest to the law, but people stood together. It is in that spirit that I believe there has been no time in India's in the journey of our republic when we need the power of people standing together in defense of the Constitution, in opposition to injustice and oppression, and in advancement of the country that we, the people of India, during our freedom struggle and in the writing of our constitution had imagined and promised, a country of equal citizenship for people of every religion, caste, language, class, gender, a country where the government would strive, in the words of Mahatma Gandhi, to wipe every tear from every eye. In a country where the state would ensure that no child sleeps hungry, no child has to sleep under the open sky, no child dies because they can't afford health care. It is for reclaiming that idea of India, where it would not matter which God you worship, or if you worship no God, you would be an equal citizen in every way. May I use this opportunity on the 61st anniversary of the KSSP to call upon ordinary citizens, people's movements, people's groups to rally forces to come together, because everything that we love in this country of ours, everything that was beautiful in the imagination of this country during the freedom struggle, everything that was precious in the pledges that we the people of India made in our constitution. In defense of all of these, I call upon people's movements like the KSSP to come together in defense of the idea of a country that has justice for all, that is equal opportunities, that has freedom for all, freedom of worship, freedom to dissent, to protest, to form your associations, and freedom from fear, and freedom from want. And finally, as promised in our constitution, what Dr. Ambedkar said was the core value of our constitution, that was fraternity. The idea that we might be, whatever we might be different in the language we speak, in our ethnicities, in our religion, in our caste, in our ways of life, but we are bound to and with each other. And injustice to you is injustice to me. And therefore we will fight all injustices together. So it is with these values that I hope, that I call upon all of us to stand up and claim back the India of our dreams. An India, Rabindranath Tagore, when I recall his much celebrated poem, it has a completely, different resonance when I recite it today. He said, where the mind is without fear, where the head is held high, where knowledge is free, where the world has not been broken up into fragments by narrow domestic walls. Into that haven of freedom, my Father, let my country awake. Zindabad, best wishes.